Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. LR here with Benji. The show, as always, supported by Zwift. I believe Benji is in the Zwift offices right now doing a second FTP test, but not a ramp test. He's doing is it 20 minutes or 60 minutes?
20 minutes, because I wouldn't survive a
Okay.
60 minutes one, mate. I gotta fake it to make it. I can't do the full one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 60 minutes, I guess. That's the worst thing ever. Anyway, this is maybe the meme awards is the wrong term. We haven't figured out a better one. The unorthodox awards, the awards that you won't find on pro cycling stats, or we had to. This was the hardest one to put together. We have best transfer, worst deviation, or in some cases, best deviations. If you deviate and win and don't get relegated, isn't that a good deviation from your perspective? Best race, worst race, most dangerous race, and funniest moments. This will probably, I'm coming out of retirement, be quite heavy on the deviation police. I'm coming back on a one pod contract to put my police hat back on for the deviation police. We've got special names for the awards as well. But why don't we kick off, Benji, with best transfer? And I guess this can be whatever way you want it to be, whether the transfer was underrated or you think they didn't get paid much and performed. However you want it. Who comes to mind for you?
I think when we think about best transfers, the likes of a Benjamin Thomas is not the first name that comes in your mind, but at the start of the season was one of the names where we were like, okay, this rider's performing better than expected. Also, Lotte Kopecky to SD Works was really strong in the preseason. We had the likes of Balsamo to Trek, Simon Clark to Israel Premier Tech last minute. That eventually led to him winning the cobble stage at the Tour de France. Soler to UAE could be named here as a good transfer, I'd argue. But when I think about the top transfers, I'd say that the Jumbo ones, Laporte and Benoit, are the ones that come in my mind the first. And Laporte especially is the one that pushes through because he's done it over the entire season. Then again, Benoit as well, you know. How do you rate Benoit transfer versus Laporte?
Laporte's ahead. I'm not sure if Benoit had any injury issues at some point throughout the year, but
Strade.
Strade, he did. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, Laporte's lead out man for Wout. He came second in Worlds or third in Worlds or something.
Yes, third.
He is a genuine classics leader, and he launched Jumbo Visma. I have him ahead of Benoit because he's an actual race winning threat. I know Benoit in Omloop was kind of that, but Laporte's ahead. For the women, the best trans. I have a tough time going past Balsamo to Trek. They signed her.
Yeah.
And then she became world champion, I think, before they signed her. No, so they signed her, then she became world champ while still at Valcar. And then she rattles off 3 one-day world tour wins in a week, fits seamlessly into the team. Giro Donna stage wins. The only thing missing was the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift stage win, but that transfer, yeah, unbelievable one, as well as Hofstetter to Arkea, who I think was their top point scorer. Without him, they probably don't make it into World Tour. If he's re-signed by Israel, maybe they remain in World Tour. So how do you wait a guy who's literally, and I don't think he's on that much money, taking a team into World Tour?
Yeah, and I think when it comes to other transfers, we also need to consider not only the transfers from other Pro Tour, World Tour teams count, eh? We also need to consider the Neo Pros, for example. Ben Turner coming in, Magnus Sheffield coming in, Luke Plapp coming in from the Inform team in Australia. And those are names that are definitely popping up this year as very strong candidates. Christoph from UAE to Entomache could be named as a good transfer as well. Oh, there's a bunch of them. Jai Hindley could be on this list, right?
Well, yeah, I think, again, how, on what metric does he not win? Like, they sign him, I pan the signing, and then he wins the Giro. Like, that's exactly why they signed. He won a stage 2 on Blockhouse. Now, whether he is a genuine tour contender alongside Vlasov or whoever they have. I'm not sure, but yeah, you sign him, and in the first Grand Tour he does for you, he wins it. That's that's bigger than Laporte being a domestique, right? Like at the end of the day,
Yeah,
the sport is about winning the biggest races, and so it kind of has to be. Like the other ones are more niche. Like Clark was a brilliant signing amidst all of Israel's terrible signings, and Lotto not signing Clark was one of the worst non-transfers. Um,
yeah.
but these are niche things around the edges. This guy's got signed, won a Grand Tour, so I have to give it to Jai Hindley. It is the Jai Hindley Award, and it was a bit of egg on my face. Who have you
Really?
got?
I'm gonna go for the essence of best transfer and still give it to Laporte because I think that he was a rider that was seen a bit underrated last year. I think, as in 2021, because he was one of the first riders still over the paard in the Ronde van Vlaanderen, and in the classics he was really good, but he was wearing a Cofidis shirt, so nobody saw him. And apparently Jumbo saw him and signed him, and they leveled him up so significantly to be relevant, very important, and vital in some races throughout the entire season. And that's what made their Cobble team stronger in width, and that's what made their Tour de France team stronger as well to be able to support both Wout and GC because he was also a satellite rider on the Granon stage, for example, for GC, while doing the lead-in work for Wout van Aert in the sprints and so forth. So all round, I'm going to give this one to Laporte, but I see where you're coming from when it comes to Hindley, based on the fact that they win the Giro d'Italia as a consequence of his transfer. And the thing with Hindley is, do you consider him now a rider that can just repeat that next season and win a Grand Tour again?
You're baiting me into. Do you want me to double down? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, in the immortal words of PFT commentator, if you just any take will eventually be correct if you just wait long enough. If you wait long enough, eventually you'll be right. I mean, the basis of my point, of course, I was wrong. Like he won the Giro, whatever, everything else is immaterial. But the basis of my point was Ralph Denk said, and Bora's goal is to win the Tour de France. I didn't think their host of signings really brought them much closer to winning the Tour de France. And my point was it put a lot of money together into riders who I don't really think can win the Tour de France. Now,
Not wrong.
he and I don't think that is wrong. So, but of course, winning the Giro is big now. We'll see at the Tour de France this year. But no, I don't think he can compete with the likes of Pog or Vingegaard. But he should do the Tour. It's low. There's never going to be a better chance for a pure climber like him.
I'm laughing, but I was the guy that was roasting Caden Gross as a Conti sprinter, and then he ended up winning proper sprints this year, and next year he's going to go towards Alpecin and actually win World Tour sprints. So I don't know. I shouldn't be laughing at your Hindley talk. I messed up when it comes to Caden Gross. Anyway, I think
I
that's
mean, maybe. I mean, I know a sprinter's the running backs of cycling, right? Like, do you want to invest a lot of money in them, or
the
is the
fuck is a
trade
running back, mate?
in the NFL? So there's a phenomenon that running backs are actually imminently replaceable, and overpaying for talent at that position is a waste of time or an inefficient use of money because things like the offensive line who create the space for the running backs are more. It's like a lead out, right? The principle
Yeah.
is if you put Pete Quickstep lead out 2020 and you put Jensen Plowright in it, he'll probably win some races. If you take Peak Cavendish or whoever and put him with the worst world's lead out and you spend all the money on the sprinter, they're not going to get good results. It's kind of like Ewan the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
it's sort of that principle. Anyway, before we get on to worst transfer, I want to mention the tour of the Makuri Islands. There's both just the general tour where you've got six stages to complete. Registration is open now. You can start and kick off stage one now. In fact, they're pretty much on the hour. Every hour you can do it, fitting in with you throughout the day. And like there's hundreds of people in uh, every single time slot. So there's the tour of Makuri Islands, which is really cool, and also there's the race Makuri, which has A, B, C, D, E categories for everyone's ability. If you want to check it out, I've been tootling along on Zwift since I got back from Australia, just getting the legs back under me. But now it's time to get into a few races. So I'll be diving in to the Makuri Island races, not in the A category. We're not there yet. But yeah, it'll be fun to just mix it up. And that's what I love about these Zwift events. If you want to check out Zwift, you can go to Zwift.com and get a free 7-day trial as well. Before we get to worst transfers, Benji, you're a Volta, you're friends with Volta. Are you hopeful? Is there a part of you hoping he has the Laporte French team to Jumbo transformation, or you don't think it could be that steep?
That steep is difficult, because it was proper steep when it comes to Laporte. Then again, I do believe that the basis was definitely there to, for example, in the cobble race, he was one of the stronger cobble riders already last season. And then just a small level up in that and be more consistent, that's what led to the results with Jumbo. But when it comes to Walter, I feel like inconsistency is a part of it so far, but also that his longer climbing is not great, his time trial is not great. He's good at punchy races, but hasn't been able to get that stage win in the Grand Tour, stuff like that. So I hope that they find a way to bolster one of the abilities or make him better all round to be more useful as a domestique or be more better as a spear point in certain races. And at the moment, he's kind of like a raw gem, which I think can be cleaned up and whatever you call the process of making a gem better. That might happen to Walter, but I don't necessarily see the steepest rise, but I do see him winning stuff next year.
I think what I'd like to see is if they can get his 20-minute power just up a little bit so that he can be making like a 5.8 for 20 soft mountaintop finish. If he
Yeah.
can be at the finish, then he's quick. We see he's
Higita?
got a quick sprint. Pardon?
Is he a Higita type in that sense? No.
Well, exactly. Can they get him winning finishes like that Romedy finish? The Higita one. He really should be. That's where I think the logical step up is for him. Anyway, worst transfer. There's a few like Lotto had a horrendous transfer window. It's one of the big reasons why they got relegated. Simon Clark, they said no to before he went to Israel. They then didn't. They had plenty of roster spots, and then they decided they realized the relegation system exists, and they signed Van Rensburg after he'd accrued hundreds of points in his African champs, and the
Yeah.
African continental champs, and they signed Barbero. Yeah, kind of mind blowing signings, frankly. They
Yeah.
were pretty bad. There was Aberasturi to Trek, and I remember roasting that signing. And then he did a
Yeah.
lead out in Tour of Slovenia or something for someone, and people were like, "Well, you see, he's really, you were wrong." It's like, no, that's not a world tour race. Tour of Slovenia sprints would. That's the point. Like Trek have a decent budget, and why they signed Jon Aberasturi, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I'll never know. Do you have any signings as well, Benji?
Aberasturi was also one of the first ones that came into my mind because we said it last year. He's a pro team sprinter that can fight in pro team sprints, Conti races, and so forth. That's the level he's in. That's the level he should be at. He shouldn't be in World Tour with that level unless you desperately need points for the UCI 3-year cycle. But I wouldn't say that Aberasturi is the most scoring rider for that either because he's Spanish, so he can't ride cobbles. That applies to most Spanish riders these days. We have a few that can actually ride couples these days. Anyway, next to that, there's a few other names that I would like to mention. Hodge to UAE is a name that pops up as he did not do anything this year, but I can't blame him for it because he had an injury basically for the most of the year. We did say that it would be dog shit at UAE, but we can't really go forth on that now. We can't confirm that because if you have an injury that takes you out of races the entire season, we can't give you the worst transfer award, I would say, personally, because they can't predict that transfer. And perhaps if he didn't have the transfer, he might have proven us wrong. Johnny Moscon, he's still alive. He's at Astana, apparently. And he's there with the likes of Leonardo Basso, legend in the sport. Yeah, those two riders really did not do anything this year, did they? Johnny Moscon really, I don't know. I don't know what happened. He just disappeared. He's nowhere to be seen. Have you seen him once
Yeah,
this year?
I don't remember seeing him on TV in an Astana kit like that. Those signings were
Is he there?
awful.
Are we certain?
Like, I think so, but I'm not entirely convinced. There's other ones like DSM's transfer window as a whole was just basically to use a lot of guys who are in the dev team and put them in their world tour team who are not world tour level riders. I don't know what they're paying Degenkolb. He obviously, I mean, I don't think it's the same money he was on at Lotto, but he obviously did nothing. There's a lot of guys who are sort of sick or injured. I think like Iking, I think had long COVID or something. Um, the one it wasn't the signing this year, but it sort of culminated this year. This is sorry, by the way, this is called the Israeli Chris Froome Award. It's hard to go past your contract pretty much. Well, it's not the reason. The reason is managerial incompetence, but like
Mm-hmm.
Froome's contract and Israel getting relegated is very closely linked to each other. So, Israel getting relegated with under Froome's contract and his lack of performance is, yeah, why it's called the Israeli Chris Froome Award, because that's one of the worst signings in the history of cycling, unfortunately, even if he does win whatever, a stage or something next year of anything. But yeah, it's hard, Benji, because the riders, like, if they're not performing, you don't see them on the screen. So because like I'm looking at DSMs and I'm like, I've never seen that guy. Like I had no idea. I had no idea that they were on the team.
I think
Um,
also when it comes to Movistar, Ivan Sosa is a name where, like, what were they expecting when it comes to Sosa? They initially announced him as like Giro GC person, but we know that when the wind starts rising, he flows through the fucking barriers by the side of the road like a plastic bag. And like this man can fly away just by a gust of wind. This is not the type of rider that can win top-notch World Tour races, and we see that he won Malaysia. Do you think that there were other races where he did prove himself at the level necessary at Movistar?
I mean, he got a few points, but yeah, like I don't know why they signed him. I mean, they needed someone to score points, I guess. I don't know what the money was, but yeah, like Sosa is who he is at this point. I think UAE had a few for the money they pay. UAE,
Yeah,
like Ackerman, I think he's on seven figures. Like, not good. Bennett as well. I think he's on a pretty heavy salary.
yeah.
Didn't perform at that level. Almeida got COVID, and he's more of a long term thing. But yeah, Ackerman and Bennett signings weren't too crash hot, and I think there's going to be some guys this year the same, like Grossschartner and Vellens. Like, I don't think they're going to perform to those contracts, but we'll see. So who have you got overall, Benji?
Oh god, when it comes to the worst transfer, also want to mention, by the way, one more name. EF in total didn't have the best transfer season. Like Chavez, Aikin, Kudus haven't done much all year. But what about Mark Padun compared to the expectations of him at the team of EF? Because we expected more than what was delivered, no?
I mean, incredible form in the Vuelta first week, like unbelievable shape. He just got unlucky. I think he probably did peak Dauphiné numbers on Picohana stage or the one of the stages that Vine won. He just got caught from the break. So if you were expecting him to be like a consistent rider, which I wasn't, then yeah, he underperformed. But I don't know. Uh, they didn't get. Was he all right in spring? He didn't really do much in Gran Camino, but yeah, his spring wasn't that good either. And then yeah, it wasn't a great year. Let's be honest. But there was that. I mean, there was that Vuelta stage where he had that Dauphiné shape,
Yeah.
and GC Group called him. So yeah,
Anyway, the worst transfer in my eyes, the Israeli Chris Froome Award. I'm still going to go with Aberasturi. I still don't know why they signed him. And that remains the same, that feeling after this year, because that's a signing that you see and you're like, okay, that's not going to work out. And then at the end of the year, it didn't work out. So that's the obvious one. Or is that a too easy of a target? Was they're not paying him much, probably, about Asturi. So as a consequence, is it too easy to say, oh, that was the worst transfer?
I think so. It's not like Aberasturi's contract is, weighing down the team or, making them significantly worse. Like the UAE guys are getting paid a lot more. It's maybe like a who did I mention before?
Ackerman.
Yeah, like an Ackerman type guy. Um, yeah, it was tough without knowing the contracts. Probably a Moscon. Like I would say, Moscon's getting paid a decent chunk of change. But my actual answer is Elia Viviani at Ineos. I think was the
Oh,
worst transfer this year because I don't think he's on 100 grand, and he is so far away from being a competitive sprinter at World Tour level, and kind of took a spot that also Cav could have taken. So yeah, I think Viviani was the worst transfer.
advocate of the devil. What if their goal is not necessarily road cycling with him, but also track
Don't
cycling and
care.
Olympics next? Okay, okay. I also want to mention. I was gonna mention something, but actually completely forgot what I was gonna mention. So I guess that's it for the category. I completely forgot what I was gonna say. So if I ever think of it, I'll remind you guys. Anyway, the next category, we've done best transfer, we've done worst transfer, Jai Hindley and Israeli Chris Froome Award. Funniest moment, that's one we could mention. Do you have a name for this? Clown Award or whatever?
I
I don't know how
mean,
to name it.
I couldn't think of a funny name for the funniest moment award. I did, I did find Peter Sagan calling Wout van Aert a motherfucker pretty funny. But that's going to be captured by the Deviation Award. I think the first thing that comes to mind is like Jasper Philipsen walking next to his bike in that UAE Tour headwind sprint stage when he started running next to it. That was like
Mhm.
an intentionally funny moment, but there's also like where he's trying to make a joke, but there's also um, some unintentional comedy ones, Benji.
Okay. Yeah. The unintentional ones is one thing. One of the funniest things for me personally. Tour de France. We're in the couple stage. Everything's super serious. Everybody's riding for their lives. Jonas Vingegaard punctures. And at a certain point during that puncture, plenty of Jumbo Visma riders wait because they want to bring Vingegaard back to the peloton. The car stops on the right side of the road, gets a bike out. Another rider tries to give his bike, but then Vingegaard goes with the bike from the car. There's 5 riders all over the road. We see bike laying out by the side of the road. We see a DS jumping out of the car. And there's this one picture that one screenshot that you could see like, okay, this is pure panic in one shot. And for some reason, every single time that I see that shot, I just laugh until I die. Like literally. This should be the painting that is on the wall of Richard Plug in his office. That is literally the funniest thing of the Tour de France and perhaps the entire year. How do you rate that?
It was pretty funny, albeit stressful because wasn't the plan, obviously. um, anyway, the other ones which are unintentional, Almeida going the wrong way in the TT, and it's always Almeida when bad stuff happens. His face just kind of goes, oh no, this is terrible. Like he doesn't even seem to get that mad, Like an Ayuso would be screaming and if you, it's like what a shame. He's just such a chill guy. Another one from those two is not so bad in the Vuelta. The Sierra Nevada
Yeah.
stage was pretty, not great. But the Catalunya stage where Ayuso just straight up attacked on the descent when Nagita and Carapaz were up the road with that 100k solo. Almeida was struggling on the descent, and then afterwards Almeida said he told Ayuso to go. So either that's not true, because it doesn't make sense, or he did say it, which is hilarious if he told Ayuso to attack on the descent. So either way, I found that pretty funny when everyone was like, what are UAE doing? That whole stage pretty much.
Yeah, I think we need to credit someone, by the way. The new social media manager, Intermarché, this year. Like, I think you made some criticism towards like Intermarché back in the
Yeah.
day, where their socials weren't top notch, and then we had such humorous memes on the Twitter of Intermarché and perhaps on Instagram as well. But I'm not that active there. But it was just hilarious to see that change, and probably good for their following as well on social media. That's one of the things that is orchestrated by the team in action that makes cycling a little more fun for the cycling fan. We also had Milano beating Ackermann at the Vuelta in the sprint. That was pretty fun.
Pretty
That's also
funny.
UAE team dynamics. I enjoyed that. I laughed so hard when it happened, mainly because Ackermann, Ackermann hasn't been sprinting at his best in 2022, and then to see him losing to his lead out was pretty funny. Not going to lie. Is that harsh towards Ackermann? Perhaps, but I
No,
enjoyed it.
and Laporte beating Wout in World Sprint was also a little bit funny.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
It was a
Pinot
little
Mizet,
bit.
you can talk about it.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what stage it was. Nothing staged the Tour de France, and it ended up being like the third most viewed video of the highlight videos on the LR channel, and Pinot just rides into a musette. It was like, so let's say it's poor old DSM. I'm going to pick DSM. I don't think it was them. Team is,
Trek.
their rider is riding. They've got the soigneurs on the right, and the guy's got his arm extended, and Pinot just undercuts between the rider and the soigneur, just rides into his arm and
Yeah.
gets smacked in the face. And then I think the reason it was funny was the photo or the still of Pinot being cradled by the soigneur. It might have been EF, I don't know. The soigneur held him, and it looked like he
Trek.
was, it was Trek. It was Trek. I thought that was pretty funny. And
Yeah.
like, it's funny because he wasn't actually like hurt or anything too badly. So I'm sure we're missing something. There was no, unfortunately, you see those old photos of the Tour de France Champs-Elysees stage where like riders steal a police motorbike, they're smoking cigarettes, they've got a gun or something. Like, unfortunately,
Jesus.
people don't do that sort of thing anymore.
Unfortunately.
It'd be pretty funny. Like the Champs Elysees stage, why stand on ceremony? Like it's not a real stage anymore. Like why not take the piss? So, I'm sure we're missing something. But yeah, my funniest moment probably was the Philipsen at UAE, just because I
Really?
had to laugh at myself. Yeah, because I was like, started laughing because I was like, yeah, why also am I watching this? Like it's 25 k's
You
to
were the
go and I'm
clown.
sitting here. Yeah, I'm also the clown. We're all the clowns watching this. So that was my funniest moment.
Yeah, for me, it had to be the Vingegaard panic shot, as in like the puncture in the cobble stage. That one picture that just shows pure panic in Jumbo Visma, and every rider being panicking, every DS being panicking. I laughed so hard when I saw it, and that remains a picture that I will always laugh at. That is full sighted. So that was the funniest moment of this year in our eyes. Obviously, we only base it off what we can remember. So if you have different funniest moments, drop them below or tweet them at us or Instagram them at us, whatever you want to do. Next one, let's talk about races a tiny bit. We have the best race, worst race, and most dangerous race category. Although I feel like the worst race and most dangerous race can be combined, because if it's most dangerous, then it's probably pretty bad. But
Oh, I would have them different. Like the Giro
yeah,
stages, the opening Giro stages were horrendous. Like if you
yeah,
look at the watts, they were lower than the watts the peloton does in UAE Tour before Jebel Hafid on the flat. It was
yeah.
literally like slower than a UAE Tour stage, some of those Giro sprint stages, because no one wanted to get in the breakaway. And we, often say, oh, why do people get in the suicide break? Yada, yada, yada. Well, without it, it makes the stage go so slowly. So they are actually an essential function to the stage, not taking forever. I think the Danish stages were also pretty forgettable in the tour. I'll be honest, like that bridge was hyped up to God, and then nothing happened. So I would say the Danish stage is pretty forgettable from the tour as well. So both, I did like the MVDP uphill sprint against
Yeah.
Biniam. I will remember that stage, but the sprint stages from either of the opening ones, nah.
It's very different compared to the Tour de France Grand Départ last year, where we were Alaphilippe winning the first stage, Van der Poel on Muur de Bretagne. Those were like two kickoffs.
And
And I think next year, not Burgos, Basque Country will be a great start for the Tour de France as well, I would say, in that sense. But when it comes to like worst races, it's difficult for me because on one end, GC was boring at the Giro, not going to lie, despite like the overturning of the last Fedaya moment. That stage was boring as fuck, probably one of the worst mountain stages I've seen in the last few years because nothing was happening. Bloody Covey wins a mountain stage as a consequence of no action in GC until the last climb. And then it's Kemna in the breakaway, satellite rider move, very nice move. Leading that, I like that move, but it doesn't save the entertainment of that race. I was just half sleeping at that point in that race. And throughout the Giro, it felt like GC was stagnated for half of the race as well. So I was kind of like, stage 14 is good, stage 20 I enjoyed 2 minutes of, and that's basically it for the Giro in my eyes. Binyam van der Poel is also the dynamic there, but it's arguably one of the worst races relative to the class of the race, being the classification. It's a Grand Tour. It's supposed to be one of the better races of the year and so forth. Now, I can't really say it's the worst race of the season because otherwise I will get punched when I get home because I met my girlfriend at the Grand Depart in Budapest. So I need to be kind. This was a good race for me personally, but entertainment wise, it was pretty bad. So it's definitely one of the ones I'm naming that weren't that great, but also Milano Sanremo is your next level monument, right? Every single year you're like, best monument
Best
of the year.
monument, yeah.
Oh, every year I'm like, quite a disappointing race.
I
I
mean,
don't know.
if you tune in before the Cipressa, that is on you. Like, that's just a lack of self-control. Just like, I
You
guess,
can't say that when we both rode on Zwift while doing it, while watching the race.
yeah, but we have to. I'll do it.
We have to, so
Actually,
other people
I'm not
don't.
sure I did watch it before Cipressa. But then that argument applies for the Tour de France and Giro. Why would you watch the sprint stages? I guess I don't know. That's a good question. I think COVID and Tour de Suisse was like that race turned into a bit of a farce. Tour de Romandie, it was pretty forgettable as well. But yeah, I'm going with unfortunately those two Giro sprint stages where they win the Why Did We Quit Our Day Job awards. Even though Cav won one, thankfully, I'm going with those two. Who do you have, Benji?
I would also likely lean towards that. It's difficult, you know? I'm going to go for the same. I'm going to go for the Giro in general. I didn't like the Giro GC fight in the end. And I would rate the the Giro in general one of the worst races this year compared to what we expect from a race like that. I'll base it like that because I'm going to get roasted for calling the Giro the worst race of the season. Because like plenty of other races that were boring as fuck, but I can't remember them, so I can't name them.
Yeah, I don't think it was the best ever. But the best race, the LR YouTube Retirement Fund Fill Up Award, I have to give to, I guess, the Tour de France Grenoble stage. There's no, the numbers speak for themselves. Like, the stage has so much interest from even after the Tour de France. People keep going back. I can see to watch the highlights of that stage. Just fascinating tactically. One of the best races I've ever watched. That's my best race of the year. Tour of Flanders I thought was really good. I have Flanders ahead of Roubaix. Roubaix was good, but in the end it had a solo winner who was never getting brought back. So the last, I don't know, 15Ks weren't actually that interesting. That's why like Estrada, Liège, or Worlds. Worlds was pretty boring, actually. Worlds is not great.
Yeah.
Those races aren't that exciting. And so Roubaix for me could have been if they'd caught Van Baarle in the velodrome and someone
Yeah.
takes a fly, but didn't happen. Flanders, though, was really good. And actually, the Pogacar getting boxed in and then abusing Van Baarle was the funniest moment we forgot. But Grenon for me.
Okay, I think that's a good one. I think Grenoble is definitely the best stage of the year for me. I think the Tour de France, as a consequence of the Grenoble stage and the action of both Vingegaard being able to overturn Pogacar and Pogacar still being able to give the fear to everybody that he might actually still win the Tour de France. There was tension throughout the entire race. Perhaps it ended in the last mountain weekend. It was going to be difficult in the last mountain weekend nonetheless, but I still was stressful every single day, especially with McNulty and Bell and having a wonderful turn on at one stage. As a consequence, Pogacar being more dangerous in our eyes as viewers. So I think the Tour de France is one of the best races of the season, Grand All stage in particular. I also want to mention the Tour de France Femmes because that was a race that we went to the start. I really enjoyed going to the Champs Elysees start of the Tour de France Femmes, and throughout that race, I actually enjoyed every single race. It felt like women's cycling took a step up with the Tour de France Femmes, and I hope that it does so in the future as well. But there's one reason why I wouldn't name it the best race this year, mainly because it had no Grand Nord stage kind of action between GC riders. We knew Van Vleuten was going to win if she survived the first four stages. Still, I really enjoyed it. But one thing that really annoys me is that on the brutal mountain stage, we said in the preview a year earlier, oh, the race is going to open up before the broadcast. And there was no broadcast when the race opened up. And that ruins that mountain stage for me. No?
Um, to
Yes,
me,
Benji,
SD,
you're right.
yeah, yeah. I think there needs to be more, and this applies to races like Criterium de Dauphiné as well. There needs to be more dynamic. Okay, do we need to see 2.5 hours of this stage on a Wednesday? That's going to be a sprint when the Sunday stage could kick off early. And why don't we have 4 hours of that stage, an hour and a half of the other stage, or an hour of the other stage? And that's been, it's always just, 2.5 of each. And so, yeah, that, I think where I really agree with you is like, why isn't it locally recorded? Like, can we it
Yeah.
should at least be locally recorded at a minimum to show us when the race starts. That's inexpensive, doesn't require a helicopter. There seems to me no excuse not to have that. But yeah, I think the parcours is actually really good this year. It could have been an all-time race if SD Works took advantage of sick Van Vleuten, and they didn't for whatever reason, whether they already gave up before the race started, whether they had internal leadership problems. Van Vleuten, I think, said after the race, like, I was literally shitting myself, figuratively and literally. I think she had gastro. And if they'd attacked me on those earlier stages properly and kept it going, I was done. Well, I was going to lose big time. And so SD Works didn't. And so the GC kind of got wrapped up. But yeah, I think the parkour was really good, and that wasn't really the fault of the parkour. Anyway, most dangerous race. It's tough. We got Burgos when they had a speed bump, and then Jumbo Visma guys hit it, and then yeah, that was like it was a descent into a speed bump the last 600 meters that stage, and then the Jumbo Visma guys went 1, 2, 3. We have Turkey where there was so many crashes, and then the final stage was slippery and technical, and then there was a
And
crash, and they just called it off.
I think one of my most popular tweets was part of Turkey this year, or was it last year? I think it was this year, where the riders like were riding through roadworks or something at a certain point. Like straight up poles, every meter on the road was a pole, and they had to evade everything. I don't remember fully what stage it was and so forth, but it was this moment that was really bloody dangerous. So that together with the speed bump thing at Burgos are the most dangerous moments in races for me. But does that really convert into the most dangerous race? We're always heavy on Bologna in that sense, but again, dangerous corners in the last 100 meters. Then also there was a traffic island in the middle, a corner that like went wider in and then it got smaller as the corner got towards the end, which is hard to see as a rider when you're going into the corner. So that's dangerous, but that was not as bad necessarily as the Burgos and the Turkey ones in my eyes. But also want to mention Croatia because like funniest part, we forgot to mention this in the funniest moment section. As in the deviations itself, well, not about deviation, but the parcours crap at Croatia, the same corner every single year where crashes are happening every single year. They keep that in, that steep corner every lap in, I think, stage 4 or something. Crash happen every year, every single year. And riders complain every year, but they keep it in. Next to that, I think there was some other issue with tram lines or so in the middle of the road where riders could straight up. They were riding parallel to the tram lines on the road that they were riding on. So they could have easily crashed. There are bollards on the side of the road. So Croatia is definitely one that I want to mention as well. But yeah, I think I'm leaning most towards giving it to it's annoying, yeah, because Burgos is not the race that comes in my mind as the most dangerous race in the world over the last few years, but this year was terrible. But then you have a Croatia who does it every single year. Poloni that hasn't fixed itself that much. Like, do we blame an organizer more when they do consecutive fuck ups when it comes to safety?
Yeah, the Burgos seemed like one isolated thing, and otherwise it's generally, I don't think of it as too dangerous a race, whereas Bologna, it always just seems to be an issue with it. I don't really have a winner of this award, but yeah, we just called out those ones. I'm sure
Everybody's
again there's
losers.
there's no real winner here in the Ryder Pinball Derby award, but the I'm sure we're missing some, so let us know. I think it is particularly egregious when the same dangerous corner or parkour is repeatedly used when we know how it issues. That to me, because they're
Yeah,
not going to use that speed bump in Burgos again. God forbid. Like
yeah.
there's no way they use that again. I don't think.
Imagine.
Imagine, yeah, like they can't. Whereas some of these other ones keep popping back up. But this is probably we're now into our wheelhouse. The big awards, the Deviation Police, the Joe Buck Disgusting Act, or Lance Stroll Sideswipe Award. If you saw his move on Alonso the other week in the F1, worst deviation slash most aggressive action, the majority of which we took a long time putting these all together. The majority of these did not result in a relegation, which is kind of mad because some of them really, really bad. I think I'm going to start off with probably the thing that I thought was most disappointing for the entire year, which was Sebastian Milano in, I think, the Dauphiné. He, at 70 kph, Hugo Page has just moved out and made him move a little bit. He has not endangered Milano on this descent whatsoever. There is so much space. He grabs Hugo Page's bike and nearly causes a crash in the bunch at 70 kph, and then I think hits him on the head on the bike. Then after the race, also assaults Page, goes up to him, and I think hits him on the head.
Yeah,
And he was not given any suspension by the UCI. To me, this is the most, like, you can nearly cause a crash through not just like a negligent move. You are intentionally doing something dangerous and hitting a guy at that speed in the bunch, and then after the stage, hitting a guy, and you don't get suspended. And that's why, and also Milano, like, had a lot of sus moves in sprints, but that's, to me, not as bad as this in the heat of battle. Oh, it's snowing outside my house. That's terrifying. And then he won a Vuelta stage. When he won the Vuelta stage, it's like, well, like if your name was Nasser Bouhanni,
yeah.
you would have got 6 months. So it was kind of,
If
I didn't really enjoy that.
if Buhani looks at someone the wrong way, he gets like penalized for 6 months off his bike. Like, and I don't know. There was one moment with Buhani though at the start of the year. I don't know where it was, a French race, some French race where Kirsch called him out on Twitter. I think Alex Kirsch from Trek called him out for why can't you stay in your lane? And he was right that Buhani deviated. If I recall, I tweeted that it was the right moment to call him out. Well, to call him out, I don't know, but it was right that he should have been relegated. But I feel like most of the time, Buhani does stuff and he always gets penalized for it, and then he sees other people not getting penalized for it. So he's probably like, "Well, if they can do it, is that something I can do?" And then he gets relegated again.
He's like, other people do exactly the same stuff he does all the time. Like, is he the cleanest sprinter? No, of course not.
No,
Does he do some stupid things? Yes. But is he like by far and away the dirtiest compared to the base level conduct from a lot of sprinters? Not really. It's just when it happens, riders feel a lot more empowered to call him out. And I think, like, first of all, for a relegation to happen, you have a descending checklist. And if none of these things get ticked, then they're not getting relegated. First of all, was there a crash? If no, 50% less likely to be a relegation. Did the rider win that did the deviation? Because if they won and they didn't crash anyone, unlikely to get relegated. Third, did the rider who do the deviation, are they not very well liked in the peloton? If they are not very well liked, it's more likely that then, option 4, will they be called out on Twitter by their fellow riders, and then they're more likely to get a suspension or whatever, like Buani. 5th was the rider who was the victim of it. Do they speak English? If they speak English, then the rider who did the deviation, if their name's Buani, they're fucked. Even if the guy didn't crash. So they're the sort of factors at play where there's a relegation. And so that's why for the one of the very few relegations was Wellens on Cosnefroy and Remco. Remco is well liked in Belgium by a lot of people, and he's a big name. He made a big fuss about it. Wellens took them all the way to the barriers, and Wellens wasn't going for the win. And so that's why he got relegated, because it was for like 4th or 5th or something. That's
Actually,
important to note.
I also want to note one thing we haven't added to our list, but I would like to mention it. The intermediate sprint that Belgium race where Lampard and Wellens. I swear that Wellens needed to get bonus seconds or something to win GC, and the entire Quick-Step team, or Lampard and so forth, started like pushing and so forth, blocking Wellens to make sure that Wellens could not get the bonus seconds. That is how I remember the event, and as a consequence, a Quick-Step rider ended up winning GC. I'm not 100% certain on my memory.
Was it Schmidt?
Auto Schmidt?
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
I mean, I actually thought the tactic in principle was fine. I thought if you get boxed in and guys and they just ride in a straight line and you're boxed in, well, that's life. The problem was Lampard putting his elbow out and elbowing him was the issue. I mean, he just got a 3-year extension from Lefebvre. So, I mean, I don't know what talk Remco and his dad had with Lefebvre about GC signings, but anyway. Wow. Surprised by that. 3 years. But anyway.
No, he was in yellow, so he doesn't deserve a 3-year extension.
Well, that's the thing. I was in yellow. It's like, okay, how replicable is it? I mean, it might not be the biggest money in the world either. But I'll rattle through a few other deviations. Richese, this was the worst part of this. Remember I went through those checklists? Remember? Richese didn't win. Cavendish is British and popular and was the victim of this. So Richese in Tour of Oman literally does his lead out. He has to sprint to the side of the rider in front of him to do his lead out. And the overhead footage came out and proved this was outrageous. The right-hand bend, he moves to the right of the rider ahead of him. Cavendish was not overlapped with him yet. And Richese does his lead out to the right, and it's in the space of one rider width to the barriers, and Cavendish follows his wheel and is blocked. And Gaviria goes to the left, jumps out of Richese's wheel earlier, and wins the stage. And because Cav chose the wrong line, Richese got relegated. It didn't matter, but that was, to me, just mind-boggling that of all things was a relegation or disqualification.
What it proves to me is that I feel like media pressure has a huge influence. Social media pressure and media pressure on the decisions that the UCI makes, because we see that both in this event and also last year when it comes to Jake Stewart versus Buhani. We were open about the fact that it wasn't a good move, but that they were being harsh on him because it's Buhani and because the public was basically crucifying him as a consequence. And some media were doing like in-depth analysis of this one event, while they would never go in-depth on any deviations just because they know it's Buhani and they would get clicks from it. So, I don't know. It's a media pressure that is a big factor for me. And there's a lot of times where we don't see that media pressure, but it does pay off a little bit because it's so significant of a deviation. And that's Guarici, for example, in Valenciana, women's cycling. Barbara Guarici deviated across the road into Consoni, and Consoni crashed out during the sprint. Consoni was probably going to compete for the victory there. I think Bastianelli ended up winning that race, if my memory serves me right. And Guarici came out on social media afterwards and was like, why did I get relegated? I didn't do anything wrong. So I don't know. Nah, that was not okay. And she's not the cleanest when it comes to her sprinting and so forth in women's cycling. Arguably the worst one of the bunch, I'd say, visibly. Because there's multiple other moments. I think in women's tour she did something that caused the crash, and there were some other races where she did another deviation. So I don't know. Just wanted to mention her as well. There were some other ones like Vernon taking his hand off his bike in Catalunya and pushing someone out of the way or something. Christoph did the same in early season, but I felt like it wasn't a push and more a I'm here situation in my personal eyes. But
Milan did something similar too.
that's not a small push. That was next level.
He's just a big boy. He's just got big arm extension.
He pulled the HSR rider and pulled him back straight up. that was together with Ugo Page and Milano the worst thing that happened on a bike this year.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I'll rattle through another one. Wout van Aert deviation against Sagan should have been a relegation in the Tour de France. When Sagan then pointed him, called him, said, "You motherfucker." Pretty hilarious though. After the finish, great thumbnail. Thanks very much, Peter. Yeah, it's because the slow deviations never get done. And in the end, if Wout had held his line a little bit more, I think there's no space for Groenewegen. He might have won that stage. Cohn Bowman on Schmidt in the Giro, I think he knew what he was doing, but then the corner, that was a really unique one because it's uphill. There's a corner involved. He's closed him out before the corner and pinched him. And the couple of funny ones were Vingegaard. When Vingegaard went on his crash spree, he crashed Izagirre and Vlasov in Basque Country when he chopped them. And then one of my personal favorites was Igita deviating against Vlasov in that punchy finish of Romandy.
Yeah.
And then Vlasov was about to get annoyed. Igita then won the stage, and they're like, "Oh, we're teammates." It was great, but I think Igita knew what he was doing there in that Romandy finish.
He did similar with Foz, which was not a teammate, right?
Maybe he didn't actually. Maybe he didn't know what he's doing. Maybe he just is all over the place.
One thing we haven't mentioned because it didn't happen on the bike is the Jumbo-Visma right article thing. That's something that should be mentioned in a category, and this was the one closest to it for me. So I want to mention that as a big of a clown play by a team, I'd say. What they did there, bringing that article out, was stupid, definitely, when you analyze the race and so forth. So wanted to mention that, definitely. Fred Wright, I spoke to him yesterday. Apparently his dad is gonna show up as Primoz Roglic on a cyclocross event this weekend to joke about it. So I don't know. It's still he apparently likes the memes that were made.
How do you dress as Primoz Roglic?
I don't know. Like, get like skiing kit on.
Like, what do you wear? It like his Slovenian national champs tree glove jersey and
a hay bale attached to your leg.
Jesus, I mean, yeah, that's one of the most dangerous moments of the year. We forgot to mention, yeah, a hay bale being dragged into the middle of the road during the Tour de France. But my winner of the Joe Buck most disgusting act, I think, goes to Milano. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, and the fact that it didn't result in sanctions is still shocking to me. But yeah, I'm sure I've forgotten some. Sure, there were others throughout the year. Oh no, I forgot. Oh yeah, Ryan Mullen. Forgetting how to ride in a straight line. I called it out, and then he went on a Twitter rampage saying I was like a basement cave dwelling person. That was pretty funny. I don't know whether that fit in funniest moments, how impressed he got. But that should go in there as well. But yeah, Milano wins this or loses this award for me.
Yeah, Milano as well for me. It's the moment that should have resulted in multiple months of suspension, and it's probably the name of this clip on YouTube if we end up clipping it from the podcast. This rider should have been banned for months. That's a good title for this, because he should have, he straight up should have for this. He punched a rider twice and was playing with Hugo Page's bike while riding. So it's not okay. He should have been banned for months, and if Buhani did it, he would have been in jail, literally.
Oh, also Juanpe. They're all coming to me at the end of the book. What funniest moment? This is going to start. Put it back in the funniest moment. I'm changing my pick. Funniest moment of the year was Juanpe Lopez, all 5'6" of him, getting into the Maglia Rosa at the Giro and turning into Armstrong level Patron. Do not fuck with me. While he's wearing the Maglia. First of all, it starts with he has the agreement with Kemna, and Camner was not trusting that he'd give him the stage, so Camner kind of brake checked the fuck out of him in that final corner on Etna and then torched him in the sprint. And then Juanpe goes into pink. First of all, the break took a while to go in a few stages, and then he would go to the front, make sure everyone knew he was going for a piss, and it was time for them to piss. And he put
Tony Martin
both
style.
hands out, like Tony Martin in Nice stage. It's Juanpe piss time. And then what else did he do? Oh, and then he threw a bid on at it was a Cohen Bowman or some unsuspecting younger rider. And then Dumoulin the next day came up to him and faked throwing the bid on at him. That is my funniest moment of the season, that whole sequence.
He then threw his musette on the floor, what looked like in anger, but apparently because there was a bee inside it. But I don't believe that. It was because he was angry.
To me, it looked like he took the musette, missed one, or got the wrong one, or it didn't have his favourite jam sandwich in it. Looked in and went, threw on the ground. And it was right behind him because there was a bee in it. That was pretty funny. So, yeah, Juanpe, I just like to give a shout. I like Juanpe. I hoped he came top 10 of Vuelta. But I do miss some Patron antics. So, yeah. That's my funniest moment. I know that it's out of order, but yeah, if you have any other funny moments or just random things that happened throughout the year that were noteworthy or we missed, let us know. We enjoyed doing this pod. It was hotly requested. Benji's off to do his FTP test now. It stopped snowing and it's now sunny, and it's not, although it's still -1 here. I'm doing the no heating or fireplace challenge this winter in Andorra. See how I go. But yeah, that's all from us. I'll be going on the Makuri Islands tour later. Check it out if you're interested as well. And we'll see you with team previews kicking off next week. We've got some big ones coming up. Until then, ciao.